Super Progressive, what is good? We're back with another episode of the Super Progressive podcast today. And as we continue highlighting the top producers in the progressive underground scene today, we have another guest who is pushing the progressive sound forward. Dowden, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing, bro?
Thanks very much. I'm doing very well. How are you?
I am doing really well. Speaking with
Good.
you, I'll give a little bit of background to our listeners about kind of why I felt so compelled to have you on the podcast. Most of you know Dowden as one of the leading progressive underground producers. For me, my exposure to his music is somewhat recent, but it came at an awesome time. Um, for me, it was at Amsterdam Dance Event. It was the first night of events that Wednesday. I was on the Hernan Cattaneo B2B Graziano Raffa boat party. And that set's always really interesting because even though they run Sudbeat together, Hernan and Graziano have definitely different sounds. So Hernan, I'd say, is more kind of it's obviously more progressive, let's say, and it has that can, especially in the daytime, can have that celestial aspect to it. And Graziano has this kind of jack in house and techno background that he likes to bring into his sets. So
Definitely.
when they play together and feed off each other, there's that friction and tension. And rather than, I explained this in when I gave my review of the event, rather than a perfect puzzle piece fitting together, it's more like something being stitched together where the fabric kind of folds over each other. But I felt like my favorite moment of the set and where their sounds blended together perfect was with this track with this deep Reese-based sounding thing, but awesome percussion on top of it. And I'm like, what the hell is this track playing? It reminds me of Head First by Adam Dived, which Sasha uses to kick off his second hour um, of the Delta Heavy Essential Mix back in 2003, I think. And that track was yours. It was
Uh,
Eternity by Dowden on Meanwhile. Um, and I was like, holy shit, this music's amazing. Go back that night, really start listening to more of your productions, fall in love with your music, man. And
Thank you.
that's how
Thank
I
you very
got
much.
introduced to you.
Awesome. That's amazing. I love that story. Um, it's really cool to hear when Hernan, Nick Warren, Guy J, John Digby, when they play your tracks, it's always really cool because you know that their taste is a curated taste and that you've kind of passed that bar of quality that you get the support from those guys is always really exciting. And I love hearing stories like that where it's like, I'm still growing as an artist. Sorry, my camera is flickering for some reason, but you're still growing as an artist. So to hear stuff like that, it's just like when they play it, you know that it's working for you, that they are playing it, and that it is valuable, and that it's gaining you new fans, which is really exciting. And
Yeah,
thank you for
and
the
I
kind
think
words.
yeah, no, definitely, man. And I think tracks like that and what I'm learning about kind of speaking with more producers, is it's one thing to have it's kind of two different points of success, which is one point of success is producing a track that you said, the curator, the DJ is saying, that's a great track. I'm going to include it in my 15 tracks I'm going to play tonight. But
Hmm.
another success is to then have that reaction be matched by the dance floor. And every single track that one of the top DJs plays, it doesn't always resonate with the dance floor. Sometimes a track may be too forward thinking for the dance floor that it's
Hmm.
playing to. Sometimes just the way the night's going, it may not work. But that track I just felt like worked more so than any other track played that night for the dance floor. It was like what everybody needed at that moment. So it was double successful. It wasn't only chosen to be played, but then it resonated as well.
Yes, nailed it.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they did a
um,
good job too curating the set, but no, that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
That means a lot. Thank you.
No, definitely. And it was double cool because ADE was kind of like a transformative experience for me. I've spent the past 3 years going into the history of this music, and I finally feel like I was caught up by the time this AD started. And it was my first time to go and experience label showcases like the Meanwhile showcase. And I left out of that week. I'm like, Meanwhile is one of my new favorite labels now, having gone into it, not knowing too much behind kind of GMJ and Matter and all the artists included. And then that Meanwhile showcase as well was just something else. So I just felt like that, like everything came together for me that week. And you were an artist kind of at the center. It was like you were featured on all the new labels that I was falling in love with, and your tracks were being played out, and they were my favorite moments of the night. So yeah, it was kind
Huh.
of like it was an eye-opening experience for me.
Yeah, a little bit serendipitous, I guess. That's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. So then I'm kind of like really recapping all the reasons why I'm excited for you to be on this podcast. Congruent to that, I come home. I've been taking um, my own production lessons, part because you always want to express your passion for this music in new ways, but also I felt like as a journalist, understanding more of the production aspect would allow me to relate more to producers. And I knew that I wanted this podcast to support producers as well as DJs. I go on YouTube and I realize that your YouTube channel, Dowden Production Academy, it's called,
Yep.
is, in my opinion, the single best resource there is for up and coming progressive producers to learn how to create and achieve the sounds that they're going after. And what I love about your YouTube channel, first of all, there's all different types of content. I love the tips in 2 minutes, but what I really love is that you do breakdowns of tracks that are released on the labels that I love so much and the labels that have a sound that as a producer, I feel like we're all going after. And so it was so cool that you go, it's not just I feel like your tutorials are so specific in a good way. It's not like how to make a progressive track. It's how to make a deep progressive track that would sound like something on Meanwhile or something
Yeah.
like that. And progressive underground music is just this really small corner of this whole musical landscape. So to have a tutorial out there and an entire production academy that speaks directly to this very niche subset of up and coming producers is a huge contribution to our scene. And I think you will be responsible for helping a lot of up and coming producers improve and make their own contributions one day to push this sound forward.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's really it's really inspiring to me, honestly, to do that. I have uh a really cool story about ADE this year. I actually had somebody walk up to me at this it was this private industry party on the Wednesday, and it was pretty cool because it was like well, there's kind of two stories to this. One is that this guy was walked up to me and was just like, "Hey, can I just give you a hug?" And I was just like, "Yeah, sure." And he just hugged me and he's like, "Because of you, I started producing music, and just last week I signed my first track to I think it was SL it was Droid 9, I think. I always get Droid 9 and SLC6 mixed up, but he signed it to Droid 9, and like that's a reputable label for your first release. Like usually your first releases are on smaller labels, and he got it signed to Droid 9, and I was just like, "Oh, that's awesome." He's like, "It's because of you that I watched your videos and I felt the way that you explained your videos made me believe in myself that I could make music, and now I've signed my first track." And so I was just like, "Can I hug you?" Like that's so cool. That's like I think I'm more excited than you are and in this situation. Like to know that I'm inspiring people enough to follow their own dreams is amazing. I would do this if everything else failed tomorrow, if my music didn't resonate with people, if I had to start a full-time job somewhere, I would still be doing these videos just because of that. Like that's reward enough to keep this going. And I had no idea that that was ever going to be like that. I was just when I started my YouTube channel, it was kind of a way just to advertise my music production courses. I was like, yeah, I'll start a YouTube channel, just like an Instagram or a TikTok, just to try and get some new people interested. And it just took off. And over the first year, was the 2 minute tutorials, and they did really well because I remember when I was learning, it was like 20-minute videos, and I'd be like watching because I started learning 15 years ago, and it was like you're watching these videos and there's the computer fan is on. You can barely hear the guy talking. You hear the clicking of the mouse and everything, and the quality was so bad. You're watching it for like 20 minutes just to find one little tidbit of information that maybe you didn't know. So I was like, when I make videos, I'm just gonna cut right to the chase, get them as quick as possible. And I basically put out my first video and then overnight almost hit my first 100 subscribers, which is like the hardest thing to do as a YouTuber. Your first 100, your first 1,000, first 10, and first, 100,000 million kind of intervals of 10. And I like woke up and I had like over 100 and I was freaking out. And then within like a week, I had almost 1,000. And it was like crazy that that would happen. So I kind of went with that 2 minute tutorials. And like you said about the niche, is that after about a year, I started to make more like broad videos of like longer videos, 20 tips of this and how to make better low end and all these things, but they were performing really poorly. And I realized that I was probably just a little bit too late in the game for YouTube videos to be kind of catering to this wide audience because there is hundreds of YouTubers and thousands of videos already doing 20 tips, how to mix like this, how to make five bass lines, whatever. So I just very slowly started to carve into, I'm just going to be niche. And I would do videos that get 1,000, 2,000 views. But those 1,000 or 2,000 views had the most likes, the most comments, the highest watch retention, and the most people signing up for like my Patreon, people messaging me, people reaching out on Instagram saying they love my videos. And I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to be a YouTuber. I never wanted to be like a big millions of subscribers. I didn't want that. And so my trajectory kind of went really fast and then just started to curve and slow right down. But the quality of the viewers for me increased a lot. So I was having these people, like I said, that were reaching out and telling me how valuable the information was that I was teaching. And I realized like this is a win-win for me because I don't want to be a YouTuber. I don't want to be a YouTube person first. I want to be a musician first and a YouTuber second. And so this is a win-win because now I can focus more on, lower view content. I'm getting I could try to make videos that get millions of views and broad spectrum and mainstream music, but instead I'm focusing on my niche of music and reaching the people that matter to me most in my music career. So it's actually helping because people like yourself might have discovered me through YouTube instead of my music, and then they discovered my music after, or they discovered my music and then YouTube. Um, so yeah, it's been really interesting because now I'm just focusing on such a narrow niche. I'm not receiving a lot of views, not comparatively to, big YouTube channels, but I'm still getting such a good reward from those views. It's definitely a quality over quantity for this, which is what I didn't think would happen in the beginning. I thought it was like you had to get, the stream to get any sort of payment on YouTube, you need hundreds of thousands of views. And so it's not about the money at all because it's not generating a lot of revenue, but it is connecting me to the people that I want to connect with most. So it's been invaluable to have this like realization and to have people wanting to learn from me. And I think it's been very valuable to them too, based on everything that I've heard from people, which is really, really exciting. Let's get turn my
Oh,
other light on here. Let's be a little bit better. There we go.
no, man. And I think like my favorite thing that I feel like with your YouTube channel is so many production classes are like one of two things, which your YouTube channel is neither of. Is one, it's clickbait and then very general information. But the second one is it's almost like a simply an advertisement for an advanced course that then you have to pay for. And what your YouTube videos for me are, there is so much information and your teaching style is so concise. And I feel like even though the YouTube video is public and made for everyone, I feel like you're speaking to me and my tastes in the music and my preferences and everything I'm trying to solve. And my interest in your production, and taking on instruction with you is not because of a lack of information on your YouTube channel. It's because it's speaking directly to me, and you can tell this teacher understands what I'm trying to achieve, both in sound, but also in my struggles as a starter. And that's why I signed up for your Patreon, and that's why I'm interested in your master classes and stuff. Can you explain a little bit? Because I think so, there's a lot of up and coming producers that listen to the podcast. Can you explain um, what if someone, after listening to this or already has goes onto your YouTube channel and enjoys what they're seeing, how can they further learn from you?
Yeah, so there's well th thank you first of all. That's really I appreciate like the kind of explanation about how you feel because that means a lot to me that people can feel that way when I'm teaching because I think a lot of it comes to how I wished that people were teaching to me when I was watching. I was just watching and I was like, this just feels like they don't really like they're not really teaching me. They're just like showing me. And a lot of videos would be like, how to make a sound like Porter Robinson. Like that's when I started. It was like when Porter Robinson was big, and they would be like, all right, so you open up massive and you put your cutoff to here, you choose a sawtooth, you do this, you put your detune to here, and then you're done. It's like a 2 minute, 3 minute video. And it's like, okay, but I don't know why I'm putting my cutoff. What is cutoff? What is a filter? What is detune? So when I started making videos, I was like, I'm just going to explain everything because I didn't know what detune was. I would just twist that knob and it made it sound cool. So I think that's why my teaching style works for people. And luckily, because I don't think I would be able to teach in a different way, but it works for people because they want to know the why and not just the how, or I think that makes sense. But basically, they want to kind of understand, yeah, why they're doing something so that when the video is over and they go to start it again, they're not like, oh, I have to go watch this video again to watch exactly what he's doing. But they're like, oh, well, I know that cutoff, if I turn this filter down, it's going to close off the top of the frequencies of the sound. So maybe that's what I have to do. And it kind of helps them and like holds their hand that way when I'm not there. Um, but yeah, anyway, so I just want to touch on that. But as for learning further, yeah, I have master classes, like a live master class, which I do. I've done two of them so far, and they both sold out, which is why I did two. The first one sold out in like almost just 2 days. It basically sold out, which was crazy. Sorry, I know my camera's acting funny. It just looks like
It's
it's
okay. I'll
glitching on
fix it.
my.
I'll fix it in post.
Okay, perfect. Um, so yeah, the masterclass sold out in like the first few days, which was awesome. So I did a second one, and that one basically sold out as well. In like I think in a week or two. So I was like, this is really special that people want to do this. So that's like a live version of me making a track. It's sort of like how I stream sometimes. And it's just like me start to finish explaining everything as I'm going, how I'm making it. And it's not pre-planned because I think it's very important for people to see what I do when I'm stuck because they get stuck a lot of the time. And again, it's like I could do a master class where I write a track from start to finish, but I've already written that track. Yes, it's valuable, but I think a lot of the value comes from what is the thought process. When you make a kick and bass line, how are you thinking? Not just here's how you do it, bum, 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 it's done, but really letting people into like my process and showing them how I kind of get around problems. So that's the masterclass, and that's pretty new. The other thing that I do is my Patreon, like you mentioned. So I have like my project files that I make for my videos, and then you can get those on Patreon as well. I do live streams every month on Patreon. So at the end of it's usually the last Sunday of the month, I have all my patrons submit their tracks for track feedback, and we listen on stream. There's usually 30 to 50 people on stream watching, and it's a good way for people to get publicity as well. Like newer producers, they get to share their songs. And also to get live feedback. So we all listen to it. My community is so great. I love the community. They're all very helpful. They're all commenting their opinions. They're all providing positive feedback. They're all really into it. And so that's really good because then people get to hear perspectives. And even if it's like maybe I wouldn't say a negative feedback, but if it's constructive, no one's ever since in like the year of streaming I've done, no one's been anything but super supportive in the way that they have helped them in giving advice and stuff. So I think it's a really good way for a lot of producers that maybe are nervous to share their music. They get this positive reinforcement that, hey, you're doing a good job, or you could be doing it better. Here's how to do it. And it's very, very positive. And I love that about the community. And even last stream, I found this artist. It was like his one of his first songs, and I absolutely loved it. And I've listened to it so many times since then. And he was so shocked because this is like my fifth song that he's ever shown anybody. And I was like, but it's like, this is so good. So it's a really cool opportunity to find artists that have maybe not shared their music with people. Um, but as for the education part, I also have music production courses. So the courses are like, kind of work at your own pace. So they're about 8 to 9 hours each. There's an beginner's course and an advanced course. Beginner's course is for basically everything you're going to learn anyways. Like, what is an EQ? When do you use it? How do you use it? Why do you use it? And like where, yeah, the five W's, I guess. Um, and then it's that for compression, saturation, reverb, delay, all of these. And then there's some basic music theory, and then at the end of the course, you kind of write a track together. Then the advanced course is basically you're a pretty I wouldn't say established producer, but you kind of know what you're doing. You're able to write some songs, you're able to put some stuff together, but it's more along the more advanced things like what is multiband compression or parallel compression and mid-side EQ, the more technical stuff that is going to take you from a more intermediate to a more advanced producer. And those courses have done very well. I wrote them like 3 or 4 years ago, and I've had lots of people sign up for them and only positive feedback, um, which is really, really great as well. I actually redid the advanced course, redid the beginner course recently to like upgrade it as well. And the last thing I have is coaching, like one-on-one coaching. And this is where I find a lot of people really, really evolve usually pretty quickly. There are some people that within just a few months like improve a lot. Somebody that I've been teaching recently is his name is Volker, and he's probably gonna love that I'm shouting him out right now because he's improving very, very fast. And I even like tell my wife, I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy is like only been producing for like 5 months and he's doing really, really well. And it's really cool to be able to teach people and see their improvement over like a 6 month to a year period. But yeah, it's like one-on-one coaching and mentorship. So you book time with me once or twice, 3 or 4 times per month, and we just go over your tracks together. And I just try to like look at your track and say, okay, what could be improved? We start at the kick, then the hi-hats, then the clap, just go through every layer and I show you what could be improved on an individual level. And I think it's the best way to teach because it's like, let's not just show you how to make something, but let's look at where your weak points are and bring those up first, because then the rest of the track is going to sound better. And I think that really motivates people too. So I think that's a good point to make, even without the coaching. If you're struggling to write music, try to focus on your weak points first, because those electronic music, you're writing everything. You're writing from the very, very beginning all the way to the end, the mixing, if you like to do your own mastering as well, but the sound design, sample choice, writing, everything you do yourself. So it is a big task. But if you have one weak point, it really drags the whole thing down, like a lot. And so focus on that first, and you'll very quickly start to improve. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Long
thank you.
answer, but
Thank you
lots,
for
lot of
sharing
things.
that. No, I appreciate it. And um, the one thing I think that is really valuable that you just shared is the community aspect.
Definitely.
Producing is a very isolating experience. You're sitting down in front of Ableton, hours melt away, you lose track of time, your headphones are in, you basically have tunnel vision. But someone like me who's really starting from scratch, the two things I struggle with is one, um, knowing where to look for valuable information. Wasting time on YouTube looking through shitty tutorials is demoralizing.
Hmm.
And I feel like, I saw that one thing that your community offers is a Discord, and be able to harvest information and guidance from other people who have just been in your shoes seems incredibly valuable to me. But the second thing too is, as someone who's just starting, it's very hard to gauge where your improvements are coming and if you're actually improving. Like, I'm still training my ears to even know what is sounding right. And I never know if something I did this week sounds better than last week because it still all sounds off to me. But these live streams that you do with communal feedback just seems very encouraging for this very isolated path and isolated experience to be able to feel like you are, moving in the right direction. So I just want to say, as someone who has started from scratch and has found your tutorials to be one of the most beneficial resources for me to just keep going with this and not be completely demoralized. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. I love hearing that. That's that's really inspiring to hear. And it's true. The community aspect is extremely valuable. I didn't have the luxury of a community when I started. I grew up in a small town of I think it was like 4,000 people when I moved in. Um, and nobody, actually, my brother was the only person that listened to electronic music, and he was uh he's about 3 years older than me, and he would listen to it when I was like 12, like 11 or 12. And I was listening to metal, and I was just like, I didn't hate it, but I pretended to hate it because we argued so much, and he would make fun of my music because it was metal. And I'd be like, well, you just listen to music that's so repetitive. But like, I would just say that, but I kind of liked it. And I never really realized that I would like it so much to pursue it after. But he was listening to like I don't know, like old like Marcus Schultz or global DJs, like basically house music that was like pretty much before it started to become more mainstream, like before the Avicii and before like the EDM bubble, like 2009, 2010, I guess is where he was listening to it a lot. And yeah, it's just funny how like who would have thought that I would end up making and DJing the music that I used to make fun of him for listening to, just to kind of like get back at him for making fun of the way that I listen to music.
It's very, very brother thing. I have a brother too, so I completely,
Yeah.
completely understand.
Yeah.
Let's get into your background in electronic music. I
Okay.
read that you are from, you're based in Berlin now,
Mhm.
but you're from Canada originally.
Yes. So like I said, I grew up in a small town of about 5,000 people when I first moved there. Um, it was like very country, small town, but I used to play in like metal bands, and I played guitar for years. Whoops. I played guitar for years, so it was I think that kind of translates into my music a little bit because might hear like certain bass lines might sound similar to some of the riffs that you hear in like metal music, and some of the like the lead sounds, the arpeggios and stuff, or the way that I write certain like atmospheres and stuff feel more like a lead guitar than it would maybe like a string instrument that you'd hear. So I think that has helped me kind of shape my sound a bit. But yeah, I played guitar since I was about 12 or 13, and I played until I was about 20. I was in bands, but they never really took it as serious as I did. I was like, this is me. I'm becoming a musician. I want to be a rock star basically. Back then, I wanted to be in a band. I wanted to tour the world and play my music. And all my like they were my some of my best friends, but they kind of took it a little bit less seriously. So then once I got out of high school and was in college and stuff, I kind of had to figure it out. I was like, no one is going to take this as seriously as I am. So let me just try and carve my own path. And I didn't know what that was yet. Started writing acoustic music, which is an extremely competitive market. And then I started to play around in like FL Studio because my other dream was that I wanted to open up a studio to record bands because and when I went to a recording studio in a band, it was one of the coolest experiences to hear your music played in a studio of such high caliber and high quality. It was so inspiring to me. And I was like, I want to do this in the future. Um, so I started to mess around with mixing and mastering. And then I started to, when I was 19, I went to my first rave at the Government in Toronto, which is like an iconic nightclub, where my wife actually, and I saw Dr. P, Chase and Status, oh gosh, Flux Pavilion, I think it was like a dubstep show one night, and then a drum and bass show the next night. It was a 2 day party, and I was like, I want to make this. This is so cool. And so I went home like the next day, went home and started trying to make dubstep. And it was so hard to start your production journey on dubstep before videos of dubstep existed. Oh my God. I had no idea what I was doing. So I spent like probably a year or two trying to make dubstep. And then when I met my wife, she showed me techno, she showed me deep house, she showed me house, she showed me tech house, all these different genres that I didn't even know existed. And so I basically every year was like, I'm now writing techno, now I'm writing house, now I'm writing deep house, until maybe 10 years ago, I found deep progressive and I didn't know what it was called. I was like, what is this? This is so chill. I love this. The melodies, everything. Like it was the first time that something really, really resonated with me. Except for dubstep back then, because I was really into metal. So it was like the metal version of
Right.
electronic. But I didn't want to make that. That's not really what my identity was. But progressive felt like it was my identity. I was always into the metal that had the heaviest of heavy and the most beautiful singing leads, melodies. It was this combination. And so I feel like that's what a lot of progressive is. You know, you go to a Guy J show, you don't know if you're going to get the most disgusting bass lines that are so dark and heavy and gritty, or the most melodic set, or both. And when you have both, sometimes it's, for me, it's like my favorite. Um, so that's how I kind of slowly got into the progressive style. And even if you listen to my old alias, which a lot of people probably know, but my old alias was named Onesie. And you can tell by like the first music I was making was like techno and house, and then by the end it was melodic, and that's why I changed my name, because I was like I can't really, like I was even making trance at one point. It was confusing. So now I'm kind of in this progressive journey, and I feel like over the past few years I've finally kind of figured out, and not even like even the past year or two, I've finally figured out how I want to sound. And it's always changing and always evolving.
Yeah. Um, Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's really cool of your natural progression, genre by genre, and then arriving at progressive, because obviously when we explain progressive as something like deep progressive, we're talking about a sound. But progressive is, while it can be its own sound, a lot of people like to think of it as more so a combination of a bunch of different sounds together and a genre of music that allows for a bunch of different styles to coexist, either in a mix or in a track itself. And
Hmm.
it seems like you naturally reached that point through your own progressive journey,
Definitely.
like, or your own production journey, doing house and then doing techno and then doing all these different things. Now you kind of, it seems to me that you have this toolbox of different styles that you can bring in different aspects of, and the fusions of those is what a lot of people know what progressive to be.
Definitely. Yeah, it's there is like a very traditional style of progressive, I would say, of like the traditional rolling style of progressive, but then it's very niche. And then you have it's hard to explain, but you kind of have like all these little subsets of this subgenre of progressive. Like you have stuff that's a bit deeper, you have stuff that's a bit organic. And I wouldn't even call them like niches or anything. It's like this big wide variety that you can pull from, where a lot of house music or tech house, it feels a little bit more narrow. And then you have like the subgenres of like Jack and House, UK house, what's the new one, hard groove. And I feel like with progressive, it's like you have a niche, but then in that niche, you can be so different and still fit within that progressive realm. And that's really cool, because there's a lot of artists that are pushing that envelope even more, myself included. I'm trying, I have like these two new remixes. I was showing one of my students last night, and I was like, they're just so different from each other, and I'm like worried that that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing, because it's like I'm trying to push that envelope, and a lot of people are. So it's really cool that it's like it's progressive, but what type of progressive? Not that it has to be labeled, but it's just like there's so many little unique pockets which I think all blend into each other, which is really cool and can make for really, really interesting like sets when you're playing them. You can take it so many different ways, which I love.
Yeah, and I think that's like really well represented by the fact that kind of the pioneering DJs that are all included in this progressive genre all do have incredibly different sounds. Like a John Digweed set over 6 hours is going to sound way different than a Hernan set over six
Hmm.
hours.
Yeah.
Yet there they are side by side as two of the leaders of what people
Yeah,
consider progressive.
exactly. It's like the difference between, it's like you have these like six pillars. Like you have like Sasha, and then you have on the other side like Nick Warren, then you have Guy J, and Hernan, and like they're so different the way that they work. Um, you have some of the other guys like from like Celador as well. Like you have all these different pillars of progressive that it's all progressive, but it's so different. Like with Sasha, I'm assuming maybe he's playing like 126 BPM, maybe, or 125, 126, but then maybe Nick's playing 120. And then you have like Patrice Boymel who kind of bridges that gap as well. Sometimes he plays fast, sometimes he plays slow. I saw Digweed and Sasha at the festival in Amsterdam, Loveland, and they played super chill, and I was like so surprised. And then Nick and Hernan played, and they brought up like the energy really slowly, but it was just completely different than I expected from John and Sasha. But again, it's just like, this wide variety that we have, and then on the boat, Guy J is going to play completely different than Hernan and Graziano did. So it's just, yeah, it's so interesting to that there's such a wide variety of such a small genre. And it's a
Yeah,
very
I
mature genre as well. It's like it's very there's so much detail in so much of the music that it's I think that's why, because you have so much like wiggle room within the genre where there doesn't need to be so many parameters met where a lot of other genres, I guess, sometimes they do. Like when you think melodic techno, like there's a lot of very obvious sounds that you can think of, or even hard techno. Like if you take the rolling bass and the rolling low end of a hard techno, it's not really hard techno anymore. But you could have a rolling bass in progressive, or you could have an organic bass or a sustained bass. Like, yeah, it's really interesting and it's
I think
fun.
that yeah, and I think that maturity is also like it's not an effect of the DJs per se, but that maturity is also found just in the preferences of the clubbers themselves. I feel like clubbers who um, enjoy electronic music beyond the club experience and enjoy it for the sonic experience,
Mhm.
those are the types of people that kind of make up the progressive community on the listener end as well.
Yeah, I think you nailed that. That's very accurate.
Um, so I'm curious about two things. One, when you kind of settled in, along your production journey, you settled into this deep kind of progressive sound. You found it to be a authentic representation of you as an artist. Um, what were some like initial moments in your producing career that gave you the confidence to feel like you found a home in this wide landscape of electronic music? Like what were some first initial moments? You must have received some positive feedback or recognition from people that you really looked up to that you could say like, hey, this is a space that I can continue to ascend through.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I remember I have a really, really bad memory, to be honest. And I remember a lot of pivotal moments for this because they meant so much to me. One was I really looked up to Tim Penner. He's from Toronto and he was doing his own thing with his radio show. His radio show was very, very popular among the underground scene. He had a very, very good, like a very strong following. And I was one of those people. And I worked in Australia for 3 months on a farm. I lived in Australia for almost a year, and for 3 months I lived on a farm, and it was like every day I was listening to his radio show to get me through the work day. And so he was somebody I looked up to a lot. And I remember I was finished work one day, and I sent him a few demos to his label, and I remember he said, I think I sent him two or three tracks, and he said, and I remember exactly that he said, that I'm definitely going to sign one of these at least because he liked them. And I remember it was like the biggest deal for me at that point because that was somebody that I looked up to so much. And his label was fairly new. It wasn't, it wasn't Sudbeat, it wasn't the Soundgarden, it wasn't Anjuna, it wasn't this massive label. But for me, that was such a huge pivotal point because it was like, I don't need to sign to those big labels yet because this is proof that I'm on my way. This is one major step for me that is really encouraging me and proving to me that 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, whatever, I wasn't able to make music that Tim would consider. But I got to the point that he is like, I'm definitely signing one of these. I just have to choose which one because it was for like a compilation. So it was just one track. And I was like, over the moon, excited. And there was been a few times in my career that that's happened. And just recently signing with Soundgarden was I sent Nick Warren a few demos a few times. He didn't want to sign the ones that I was sending, which is like totally fine. Part of the, part of it. No, like no, I'm not upset by that at this point anymore. I used to be, but I'm not anymore. I just understand it's not what he wants at this time. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna write some more music for Soundgarden, but I don't like sitting down and being like, all right, Soundgarden today, and then writing a Soundgarden track. I just write my own music, and if it fits the labels, then I sign it. And so Zanki Gulati, who I know you did an interview with as well, he reached out to me. Like we met at ADE 3 years ago, I think it was like 3 years ago, and so he reached out to me. He's like, "Hey man, I'm doing a release on Soundgarden. I'd love to have a remix from you." And I was so excited because I was like, "Oh, this is amazing!" Because I want to sign with them, but I haven't really written anything for them in the past like year that I've been writing, and it's going to take another like probably year of writing music to even send them more demos. So I was super excited, and both the original and the remix basically did very well. Like they're basically neck and neck in how well they did, which is really awesome. And so that was a really good point. And I kind of jumped a little bit, but in between that was Mango Alley. Alex from Mango Alley that runs the label. He reached out to me and asked me for. It was kind of the same thing that happened. I was like looking at Mango Alley like every day. I'm like, oh man, this is a label that I'm gonna get signed to. Um, and there was a Simos Tegius remix that was called. It was the Rise Simos remix. And I was listening to that like every time I wrote music. I was like, I want to sound like this. This is so good. And as I was thinking that, trying to write demos for them, they reached out and asked me for a remix. And again, I was just like, what? This is crazy. And that remix ended up being like one of their highest selling tracks for that year or something. And it was just like at that point, people started to take me more seriously. I had people reaching out to me for remixes after that. I had people messaging me, congratulating me. And it was just a really big turning point where I was like, okay, this is where people start to take me seriously as a producer, and it felt really great. And then my follow-up remix after that also was one of their highest selling tracks. It was like their top 10, um, which was like really good publicity and really like reassuring. And then just recently setting with Sudbeat as well was again, it was one of those moments where I was just like, this has been a goal of mine for literally years and years and years. I signed with a booking agent last year as well for South America, another big goal. And I think the last two goals is Anjuna, which I'm slowly starting to think about and start to figure out how I can make that happen, and Lost and Found, which is not going to happen because he wrapped up the label.
Maybe early morning though.
Yeah, early morning. That's the new goal. But it was like, yeah, I remember when he announced that he was shutting it down, I was like, oh, because it's not gonna happen now. But I know that eventually it would have, hopefully. And so now, you just gotta shift your focus, and Juna is the next goal. I've never sent them anything. Um, but I think that I could when I'm ready, and
Yeah.
I don't want to rush it. And yeah,
Well, along your journey, something sticks out to me, and it's kind of the advice that you gave, which is with a lot of the producers I speak to, they have goals of releasing on labels for a benchmark of quality, but they're not, and you mentioned this, you're not sitting down and writing tracks specifically for that label. It's
yeah,
it's writing tracks for yourself. Um, and hearing your journey, I think a lot of up and coming producers can take a lot of good takeaways from that. One being, if you focus on making tracks that that you want to make that are representative of your sound and your taste, for a lot of the accomplishments that you explained, they actually didn't necessarily like sending a demo isn't going to be the only way you eventually make your way to a label. I think what a lot of labels saw in you, and maybe what Zenki saw in you, and what Alex from Mango saw in you is like an aspect of originality. And the fact that those leads came from the reverse, rather not sending a demo, but people reaching out to you because they like your sound, is something a lot of producers, I think, that may be frustrated with not getting on their labels right away can take from and still retain kind of confidence in their own sound, that it's something that you should always be in pursuit of something that is representative of you rather than just sitting down and, say, I'm going to make a Soundgarden track today. I'm going to make an Anjuna track today.
Yeah. It's I'll be honest, sometimes I do sit down and I think that today I'm gonna try and write something for Anjuna. Today I'm gonna write something for Soundgarden. I always think that and I or not always, but I sometimes I think that. I'm like, okay, today let's just try and cater to them to try and get to that point. And then within like, a couple hours of writing, it's completely not Soundgarden. It's not Anjuna, but I like it. And I'm like, well, all right. And I just go with it because I don't want to take away that momentum for the sake of changing the trajectory of the track. And it happens so often, like almost every time that I try that, it does happen. So I'll be honest, sometimes I do sit down and I think I'm gonna try and write something that would get signed by a label that I want to get signed by. Like Meanwhile for Eternity actually was one of those tracks that as I was writing it, I was like, oh, this would be I kind of I think I was writing it and then I was like, oh, this kind of sounds like Meanwhile, and then I went with it. But if I sit down to try and cater to a label, then yeah, sometimes I will just start and it'll go a different way and I just run with it because I think that's more valuable than just trying to just stop what I hear in my head and try to do what I think they want to hear. I just think that takes away my artistic value and it doesn't really, not that it doesn't sit right with me, but it doesn't help me write the track a lot of the time. I end up not writing better that way, which yeah, it's something I want to say to all the producers that are like, the aspiring producers is that the label process is so frustrating sometimes because as you're starting, you're trying to get signed and you send demos and your perspective changes a lot. Like I just saw my phone went up. I got an email. I get requests for remixes like weekly now. I just had this artist reach out to me yesterday and asked me to do a remix. To an artist and a label yesterday reached out to me. You get to a point in your career where labels want you, and that's a really, really exciting feeling. And it hurt at the beginning when I would send to labels. I sent demos to Univac. I sent demos to Mango Alley and a bunch of like Mystique Music, these labels that I've now released remixes or originals on after the fact that they've approached me or that I've just set like I'm confident that I could get a demo signed to them very easily because my quality is of that status now where I can reach out to most labels um that would fit that style and my music I think would be good enough that if they liked it, they would take it. And that's a really, really good luxury to have. But 5 years ago, I was nowhere even close to that, and I was sending tracks to these labels, and they weren't interested. So, my point is, at first, it feels so difficult to get signed to certain labels, and these labels that I used to look up to and be like, "Oh man, one day I'm going to sign to these labels." I'm at the point now where I could almost pick and choose which of these labels that I used to dream of. I can basically pick and choose and reach out to them and say, "Hey, I'd like to do a remix for you, or I'd like to send you demos." And because of where I've taken my music in my career, and not only that, but the relationships that I've made with them is also very important, that it's a lot easier now because it's not just here's a demo and then they listen to it and they say, okay, I like it. Yeah, let's sign it. It's, hey, I like we've connected over the past 2 years of talking. I've done a remix for you. I've sent you demos. We have a relationship now. It's so much easier to approach these people when they know who you are and you have this relationship. And I've proven myself. I'm one of the highest selling Beatport hype artists of last year. So even if all else fails, they might look at that and be like, well, I don't like the track, but the numbers speak for themselves. Like all these accolades that you slowly build, it becomes much, much easier to sign tracks to these labels. And these labels that I used to look at and dream of are now friends of mine and acquaintances and people that I've connected with. And even if we haven't connected, I still feel like I have enough of a musical proof in my sales, creativity, and I guess like viewership or fan base that when I do reach out to them, it's more than just a blind sending to that label. Does that make sense? I'm trying to not sound cocky by any
Absolutely.
means.
No, no, no. I think it's incredibly valuable for up and coming producers to hear your story because you were in their shoes,
Yeah,
relatively speaking, not too long
not
ago.
too long ago. Yeah.
And I think producing is what it comes down to between in terms of building a successful producing career. And I wouldn't know, but from what I've seen, is it's a war of attrition. It's like
Mhm.
it takes so much time to one, develop your skill, but two, naturally foster these relationships
It's
that
very
if you have
important.
your expectations set, if you feel like your expectations aren't being met and you could even be 4 or 5 years into this, it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen.
Right.
It's just this is the path, and this path is more of a decade-long path than a few years path.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, I thank you for sharing that. And I kind of the last thing I'd like to ask you about, because I'm curious, is you are based in Berlin now. You moved from Canada to Berlin. I made a similar move from New Jersey to Manchester, UK. A lot of that had to do with not that Manchester's the beacon of progressive here in Europe, but more so it's the proximity to cover a gig in the United States. And it's kind of the same in Canada. Like if you wanted to go outside of your local scene, you're looking more so at a flight than a few hour train ride.
Yeah,
And here in Europe, everything is much more condensed. Amsterdam's a 50-minute flight from here in Manchester. Um, which makes stuff like Amsterdam Dance Event possible for me to go and cover. But I'm just curious about your motives for moving to Berlin, which I consider typically like in terms of music, not like the stereotypical view is that's like a techno kind of beacon for the
yes.
world, but why you made that move and how you feel like it's benefited your creativity or your career or any other benefits.
Okay, yeah. So my wife and I we visited Berlin, I think 3 or 4 times before we moved here for like 3 months, right before COVID. And sorry, my alarm's going off.
Okay.
And when we came here, we really liked the nightlife. We liked the club scene. Like Canada is very sheltered, and I know the United States is very similar in terms of like when we told European people that we have like a last call, like you can't drink past a certain time, they're like,
Yeah.
what do you mean? Like, what last call? Who's calling who? We're like, no, no, like you can't, you have to stop drinking at 2 o'clock. And they're like, why? Like, it's just, it's a very sheltered. And the music scene, the progressive scene in Toronto, we have a couple promoters. We only have a major, like one major promoter for progressive, and his name is Oz. He runs Osmosis. Um, he does a variety. So he does trance as well as progressive house. And he did a Soundgarden party last year. He did, Soundgarden and Days Like Nights party. He booked John Fleming back to back, Fleming back to back Lawrence, whatever, Fleming versus
Yeah.
Lawrence. He booked that for Halloween, right? So he brings in the big artists. He booked me to close for Rodriguez Jr. in Toronto, but he's like the main guy, and there's like not really many other ones. So it's like if you're not playing his shows, then you're probably not really playing. Or like I played maybe a couple times a year in Toronto, like maybe. And so when I came to Berlin and saw just the nightlife was so booming, and Europe in general, the nightlife is so much easier because it's much more mature. They're 20 years ahead of us, at least in terms of electronic music for a lot of reasons. And so my wife and I were like, you know what, we have to move to Europe. I mean, we want to move to Europe. It's much more our culture. My wife is actually Italian. She just got her passport. So when we moved here, it was like we need to be somewhere where my music career is going to take off, because in Toronto it's not going to. And the same with the United States. There's not really much progressive that you can grow. And the closest town that has good progressive is Montreal, and that's like an hour and a half flight, but it's like a 6, 7 hour drive. It's just not feasible. Here, as soon as we moved, I think I've been here for 2 years now, and this year I played like 5 new countries. I played like I think 8 or 9 countries in total, maybe 10, including Canada, and like 5 of them were new, and all within a year. And like that's crazy to me, because in Toronto I wasn't even playing 10 shows a year. So it was definitely beneficial to move to this side of the pond and be so much closer to so many pockets, like cities and countries that are throwing these events. And it's very valuable to me to be able to play at least a few times per year in these places, because in Toronto it was just not going to happen. I like
Yeah,
Europe a
man.
lot better in general. It's much more my style, my speed. I'm sure maybe you feel the same way with the UK. Is just, it's Berlin, not so much what I expected, to be honest. The people are not as warm as I expected. Um, but I've made some friends here now, and it feels much more like home. And it's just really, really nice to be able to like I went to Amsterdam last weekend to visit some friends. It was only an hour flight, and definitely a luxury and a privilege to be able to visit all these different countries and experience that while I live here.
Yeah. So just to wrap this up, for your fans out there, like what can we look forward to from you that you can share even vaguely in 2025 as time moves so fast after ADE, like the weeks are just
I know.
flying by. But like,
Uh,
is there anything that you can share us for people who love your music that we can hope to look forward to from you in the upcoming year?
yeah, definitely. I know it's so funny. ADE always feels
It's like
it
New
feels
Year's
like,
Eve.
dude, I know it's like ADE happens and you're like, I feel like I was just here, like literally. And once you see the same people every year, it feels like that more and more. And
Yeah,
it is one of the best times of the year though. I love seeing everybody at ADE, but it's like crazy how fast it creeps up on you. But yeah, definitely. So like I said, I signed with an agency in South America. So they're handling my South American bookings because of I know there's a lot of like financial turmoil in South America right now. They're struggling to bring in certain artists. So we've been trying to get me a tour for a year, but because the flight is so expensive from Europe, we're trying to make something happen in January or February when I'm in Canada because it'll be a little bit closer. So hopefully a tour January, February, um, in or just January, I guess, probably in South America. Um, and then more gigs in Europe. I am already speaking to some people about Italy and a couple new countries. I am. This is a kind of a big announcement. I sort of teased it once before, but I am starting my own label. Um, I'm aiming for the first quarter or second quarter, probably the second quarter now of 2025. But I do want to start my own label. It's going to be a very boutique label, like just very, very scarce releases a couple times per year, just another outlet for expression. And I'm going to not even have demo submissions. It's going to be completely like contact only. I'm going to reach out to you if I want something from you. And I want to be able to help smaller artists as well as keep the quality, like kind of like how Meanwhile, everything on Meanwhile, you're gonna have the best of the best. I want to do that, but a lot less releases just because I don't have enough time. Um,
right.
so there's that, and then some new music. I have 4 tracks coming out on Mango Alley, um, which a collaboration I did with one of my students, which is really cool. And some more remixes. And I think that's basically it. Some more, I have tracks that I have probably going to start sending around. So some new releases as well. And yeah, just some more remixes. I do a lot of remixes. I like to do them.
Yeah. Oh, no. Well, as a big fan of yours, I am nothing but stoked for all of that, ranging from the label
Thanks.
to the new releases. And yeah, man, I just can't thank you enough for I know you're really busy, so taking the time to speak with us, taking the time that you do to share so much information and instruct the next generation of producers. And yeah, I'm just across everything you do, I'm a huge fan. So thank you very
Thank you.
much, and please
Yeah,
keep it
no,
up.
thank you. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.